see my Twitter got hacked?
Yeah, what the hell happened?
I don't know, man. Okay, welcome back to the Nassau Hockey Podcast. James Nichols here, as always, and joining me today, first time in a little while there, pal, is Joe Pantorno, AM New York, Tailgate Sports. What's going on, buddy?
Not much. Yeah, it does feel like forever. I think we've all been kind of busy. It's been kind of wacky, but glad to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime. If you haven't heard, I think the last time you were on was before Tailgate Sports actually launched, if I'm not mistaken. So why don't you just give our audience a little bit of insight as to what Tailgate Sports is?
Wow, thank you for the plug. This is great. Yeah, we are launching a new sports betting website called Tailgate Sports, where basically our main focus is to educate and empower our readers, whether it's sports betting or just getting knowledge of everything they need to know before the game. We focus on every sport under the sun that we possibly can, at least for our small yet growing staff, which they've been working really hard, and I'm very thankful for them. And while I still do that as editor in chief, I'm still working with AM New York as their Islanders and Mets guy. So we have been busy, but that means job security, and we're very thankful for it.
Explains a little bit why it's been a little while since we've seen you on the show. Joe's been super busy. Always good things. Always good to hear. But let's get to what we're here to talk about on the Nassau Hockey Podcast, as always, which is the New York Islanders. And the unfortunate note that we spoke about last week is that they've been officially eliminated from the playoffs, and the regular season has ended. All but one game that's going to be played later today on Monday, the 2nd, as we record this. I believe it's the Winnipeg Jets who got one game postponed. But the playoffs are about to start, and the New York Islanders will not be a part of that. Exit interviews were conducted, and there was a pretty general consensus amongst the roster, right? They all pretty much said, we're not mad, we're just disappointed. The good old parent guilt line. But in themselves, that we're disappointed in ourselves. We expected better of this season. What were some of your key takeaways from the exit interviews, Joe?
Yeah, I think it was really just like you said, the overarching disappointment that was, transmitted from basically everybody on the team, and that's completely understandable. And you really can't blame them for being angry just because there was all of the things that we've covered ad nauseum that's happened to them this year. This was really the year from hell for this franchise, and both on and off the ice. This was one of the most difficult seasons that I can really remember a team in the NHL going through. But still, at the same time, I think it's also one of the most disappointing, considering just where these preseason expectations were. But that being said, I also kind of got this sense of relief in a way from the team, and even Barry Trotz leading up to the last game of the season, where it was just kind of like, okay, we got through it. We're not in the playoffs. This was the year from hell, but we got through it with all of our appendages, and everybody made it through semi-healthy. And again, the final buzzer sounded on Friday night against Tampa, and it's already eyes on next year. And this is an opportunity for them to finally have a full off season where they can train and get ready, and it's not shortened or abbreviated. And they can kind of put all of their efforts forward towards just getting ready for the start of the season, not necessarily getting healthy or just trying to get some rest here and there. It's full steam ahead.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. There definitely was a sense of relief there, because if you look at the last few off seasons that the Islanders had, they went on 2 deep runs, right, to the Eastern Conference Final. They've had like a month and a half in between their seasons in the past 2 seasons, if that. Whereas other teams have had a plethora of rest. And now you can turn around and say, well, look at the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they're right back in it after 2 Stanley Cup wins, and they're back in the playoffs again, and they're back to their dominant self. Steven Stamkos has a 100+ season and whatnot, but we've also talked ad nauseum about the difference in talent on both rosters, so we're not going to rehash that. However, something that we can say is that there has been more talk recently, um, especially from Tampa Bay's head coach John Cooper, about the similarities, the parallels between the Islanders and the Tampa Bay Lightning and the road they took to their success. So um, I thought that was interesting from John Cooper. But you mentioned before how everyone in the room, the Islanders room, was talking about um, you know, already focusing on next season. And I thought that was a really great comment from Mathew Barzal's exit interview. I want to play a short clip here about what he said and everyone's thoughts and feelings on heading into next season immediately after this one ended.
Yeah, I think instantly after the game yesterday, we were already talking about bouncing back and where we know we need to be. So I think when you see that that quick turnaround in us wanting to have a winning mentality and not worrying about plans this weekend or it was the chatter was all about kind of getting better for next year and taking this off season, long off season, and getting stronger. I feel like the last two years haven't really had a chance to settle into training. So I think everybody's gonna work hard this summer, get better, get stronger, and I think this group's gonna bounce back.
Some really mature comments from Barzell there, talking about how we didn't start to talk about, oh, what are we going to do this weekend or what are we going to do this summer, since we have such a long time off to rest and recharge. The consensus in the room was, what are we going to do next season? How are we going to improve? How are we going to take that next step forward? What are your thoughts on that mindset right there?
It's the right mindset to have, especially for a team that still has a lot to prove and still has a lot of unfinished business. Kind of an interesting dynamic, really, where even in a sense, the Montreal Canadiens kind of have that mindset too, where okay, they were in the Stanley Cup final last year and
Yeah.
worst team in hockey this year, so they were on even more extreme ends of the spectrum compared to the Islanders. But that being said, I mean, this is really just a team that's going to. I really don't know how to properly say it, I guess, but it's more of a question of them just trying to remind the NHL that they are still, I don't want to say an elite team, but a top tier team, where they still kind of have that style and that mindset that they're a tough team to play. And we saw it again. We saw it in glimpses all
Yeah.
throughout the season. We saw little spurts here and there, but it's all about consistency. And I think a lot of the factors that withheld the team from really achieving that was as much of an off ice problem as it was an on ice problem. So I think when all of these exterior intangibles sort of die down and maybe we have even a little bit more of a normal 82 game season next year, we might see more of an Islanders team from the last 2 years. But again, I just like playing devil's advocate here. We really haven't seen the Islanders succeed to such high levels in a full 2 game season yet.
Right.
So there is a grain of salt to take here. And I think that's going to be one of the huge questions going into the 22-23 season if Lou Lamoriello doesn't make a big splash.
Yeah, we're going to talk about if he does or does not make that big splash. But one thing that Barzell spoke about in his exit interview was the chemistry he built with Zach Parise and how much he loved playing with him and what he's learned from him and how they've learned from each other and started to build some good chemistry and get a sense of each other's style of play, where now Barzell's going to know where Parise is when he's not looking and vice versa. Um, he foreshadows a little bit the possibility of playing with Parise and Palmieri next season. Um, can you see that being the Islanders' first line essentially? Because I know he was demoted to the third line after his injury and pretty much stuck there for the remainder of the season. But if he's going to become the first line center again for the Islanders, the franchise player they believe him to be, can his line mates be Zach Parise and Kyle Palmieri?
No. If you want to say this is the second line, maybe that kind of cushions the blow a little bit. But we need to see Mathew Barzal with an elite goal scorer in order to maximize his talents. We've come to the conclusion. It's been 4 or 5 years now. Mathew Barzal is not a 30 goal scorer. He won't be a 30 goal scorer.
Right.
but he should be a 60-plus assist man.
Agreed.
So that's why you need to put him with the best possible talent. The problem is that the Islanders' best consistent talent is down the middle. So, if you go into next season and you don't have that elite winger, I think you need to start the season with Mathew Barzal on the second line, and Brock Nelson needs to take the spot at the first line, and see if he can again have a full healthy season, maybe where he's flirting with 40 goals. So it's all really going to come down to roster construction, but you cannot roll out in 22-23 with a first line of Parise, Barzal, and Palmieri. Number one, it's just not good enough. Number two, this isn't me putting down Zach Parise. He was probably the most consistent Islander this season.
He's the only one to play 82 games.
Exactly. And his effort was just as consistent, where,
Right.
if you were to have some sort of faux MVP, team MVP conversation, he would certainly be in that discussion. That being said, he's going to be 38 next year.
Right.
He scored 16 goals. So he's just not a first liner.
No, and listen, you take that on your third line all day. 15 goals or 16 goals, 35, 36 points. I mean, that's no slouch for the third line, and especially at 38 years old. So, and he does a little bit of everything. Parise, he kills penalties. He plays on the second unit power play. He's great at 5-on-5, and like you said, he gives 110% every shift. But I'm in total agreement with you here. He's not a first liner anymore. He once was when he was scoring 35, 40 goals. Sure. But he's not that guy anymore. He gives the same effort, great. But no, he's not the line mate for the winning New York Islanders next season, if that's what they want to be. I'm in definite agreement with you there, Joe. Interesting comments came a little bit later with Barzal. He was asked about his future and does he want to sign a long-term extension with the Islanders, given that he is eligible for that starting this summer. Let's hear from him on his contract extension and the possibility of staying an Islander for life.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've given thought to it. Would love to be here on the island. This is home. This is where I want to be. This is where I want to win, and I love my life here. Love the city, the fans. Obviously, our new rink is amazing, and I love wearing the blue and orange. So, would love to sign long term here and spend. I think it's such a cool thing when a player plays his whole career with one team. A lot of my favorite athletes have done that, so it's something I obviously would like to follow in as well.
Who are your favorite athletes?
I mean, Michael Jordan, Sid, just two guys Patrick Kane, those kind of guys.
So I love those comments because he compares or he talks about his favorite players being Michael Jordan and then switches over to his favorite hockey players, which are current NHL players, Sidney Crosby and Patrick Kane. And it's funny, the comments came out and there was a slew of, oh, I've heard this before from he who shall not be named, who left for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I don't need to tell you that these situations are not the same, Joe. Tell me and the audience listening right now, why are these two situations not the same? And you should be happy to hear those comments from Mathew Barzal.
I mean, why wouldn't they be happy to hear those comments? That's all he can do right now. All he can do is tell you.
Right.
You can just come out and say it. Where it wasn't, diplomatic conservative talk of, well, yeah, you know what, I would like to be back here, but that's up to the organization. And
right.
No. The Islanders are in a much better place where they are now in a possible pursuit of giving Mathew Barzal a long-term extension compared to where they were when they had the opportunity to sign John Tavares to a long-term extension. And
right.
Obviously Barzal alluded to it with the new arena. That's a huge thing, number one.
Huge.
The Islanders are now, tenants in a state-of-the-art, beautiful, immaculate facility.
Probably the number one arena around right now, like ever.
I mean, sure. I won't say that because I haven't been to all of them yet.
Okay.
I do have some traveling to do. That being said, um, the Islanders are in a better spot in terms of where they are on the ice. I mean, yeah, they missed the playoffs this year, but they still have the bones of a two-time Stanley Cup semifinalist team.
Right.
Um, there's an actual legitimate light at the end of the tunnel here compared to Tavares, where it was more almost kind of like well, it seemed like empty promises, and it might have seemed like empty promises to him at the time. Where okay, you know what, we're gonna build a contender around you. Well, we might get a new arena. Well, dealing in strict hypotheticals and then being offered an 8-year deal where you're going to say to yourself, well, I can go somewhere where I think I know the grass is greener, uh,
Right.
or I try to stick it out. And obviously, loyalty is a son of a gun here. And
Right.
you're going to ask Islanders fans and say, oh, well, he should have stayed. Yeah. But at the same time, you have an opportunity to go to a better situation at the time, which Toronto certainly seemed like. And even heading into the 2018-19 season with Barry Trotz as your head coach, Toronto still seems like a better situation. But now that the Islanders are a little bit more established, and even when they were amidst the season where they were missing the playoffs and they were getting eliminated, I think the conversation around the NHL was, okay, this is an anomaly. The Islanders are going to be back next season. And if you're the Islanders, you have to take Mathew Barzal up on this.
Yeah.
And they would be foolish not to.
Yeah, it's 100% agree with everything you just said. Barzell has seen a much different road as an Islander than John Tavares had seen. The ownership, Malkin and Ledecky versus Wong is much different. The general manager Lamorello versus Garth Snow, much different. The head coach Capuano versus Barry freaking Trotz, much different. The success he's seen along the way, much different, right? I think he had 1 year with John Tavares where they were okay. And then the season he leaves, they're suddenly better. And he saw why those things happen. He saw the change in ownership. He saw, the change in the administration and how things were conducted around the team. So it's much different experiences for Barzell than it is for John Tavares. And the reason why everybody should be happy about these comments that he had said was exactly what you said, Joe. It's not up to the team. He wants to be here. He said he was not. He bared no bones about it. He was not passive about it or anything like that. He said, "This is where I want to be. I love it here. I want to sign a long term extension." He said those words. That you don't often hear that from a player, especially one who's contemplating not staying. So I would rejoice if I were in the fan shoes at those comments, and take solace in the fact that Matthew Barzell is probably going to be here for the long term. Now the question becomes, um, he's got 1 year remaining on his contract. He's eligible this summer to sign that extension. Can you see things getting done this summer, or does Lamorello bide his time like he says he likes to?
I would that this is tough.
Yeah.
Based on recent track history, I mean, I would say that Lamorello would bide his time. Also, I think there are a lot of other portions of the roster that need to be addressed, and a still pretty tight salary cap situation that needs to be addressed
Yeah.
before you can legitimately come to Matthew Barzal and say, "Okay, listen, we want to give you a 8 by 10 extension." Um, that's a whole different conversation if he deserves a contract that large. And I don't think that's one that I am going to partake in. Um, that being said, you need to get all of your ducks in a row
Right.
before you then make that big offer to him, which you know it should come. Just the idea of figures or how much a year he's going to make. That's obviously we have no idea about that right now.
Yeah. The thing for me is, and I wrote this in my article that published a few days ago regarding Barzell's long term extension that he does indeed want. Um, I wonder if he bets on himself. Two things can be true. He can want to sign here long term and stay here for his career. However, he could also want to wait until next summer so that he can, have a bounce back season. He had a another good season, but he slightly regressed. Um, there were moments where you kind of scratched your head with him, and you would almost imagine that he wants to bet on himself this season coming up to have a better one, to maybe maximize the dollar amount on that contract.
Yeah, I think, and this might be more of a testament to the shrewdness of Lou Lamoriello as a businessman.
Hmm.
You might see Lou Lamoriello come to Matthew Barzal this summer. Again, this is mere speculation. I
Right.
get that out there in the first place. Lou Lamoriello can go to Matthew Barzal and kind of give him a lowball offer and say,
Sure.
well, you know what? And again, I'm speaking just strictly facts here. On paper, statistically, this is the worst season Matthew Barzal had as a pro
Right.
in terms of production. Worst season he had. Still, again, that's he had a rotating carousel of line mates. There was zero consistency around him. It's understandable. Um, so you want to see the Islanders go out and invest in Barzal by investing in the team further, and that's making a deal to ensure that they get a perennial 30 plus goal scorer.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. I had wondered, um, along with another contract that has to be done, if Lamorello would lock both of them up long term, just to hopefully keep the cap hit as low as he can. And that second contract that we're talking about is Noah Dobson. Um, 51 points in his third, quote unquote. I'm going to put those in air quotes, NHL season. However, contractually, it is his third season. He is due for a contract. Do both sides agree on a long term marriage already? Or does Dobson opt for the bridge deal for a bigger payout later in his career because he's, again, just 22 years old?
That might be the option. I mean, we saw it with Barzal, and we're seeing it with Ilya Sorokin, where they
Right.
have these bridge deals. That being said, I think Noah Dobson's ceiling is probably the highest of those three, which says a lot about Noah Dobson and the season that he had.
Yeah.
This was a historic season that was had by a 22-year-old defenseman in terms of Islanders franchise history.
Right.
Um, and we're already seeing the makings of a number one defenseman of the future.
Oh, how could you say that, Joe?
I know. A a I would like to think, if not a perennial Norris Trophy candidate or candidate in the conversation at least, but a future franchise captain as well.
Oh,
Um,
I like that.
this is this is something that might be played a little differently, where I think the conversation of a long term deal should be had.
Yeah.
And you know what? You might go out and say, all right, well, this was a limited sample size, and he's still young, and he might regress, in his second or third full season, however you want to call it, next year.
Right.
You have to see who he's paired with. That's another big thing. But at the same
Yeah.
time, I think the Islanders are going to be ready to take the training wheels off in terms of pairing him with a veteran defenseman that's going to be able to show him the ropes. Because if he can get through this season and excel the way he did, you put him under normal circumstances, and you should see even more of a boost in his numbers next year.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm looking right now at the athletics player cards. I like to check these out once in a while. It was good to see Noah Dobson's card uh, continually escalate in terms of production. But what also escalated was his market value by Dom Luszczyszyn of the Athletic. His market value is quote unquote 7.9 million a year. Um, Seems a bit rich for a 22-year-old coming off of his first season of success. But if they did uh, decide that a long-term marriage should be had starting this summer, what does that contract look like? Obviously, the term would be 8 years. What's that AAV in your mind?
Listen, I mean, that value of 7.9 million in the long run, that could be one hell of a bargain. That's a gamble, though.
Right.
That being said, I mean, is 7 million out of the question? where that might seem too rich for him.
I wonder if he gets paid annually more than Pullock or Pellick at this point.
That's tough.
Right.
And again, I don't think the Islanders are, Lou Lamoriello isn't the kind of guy that's going to give out that traditional kind of contract where it's going to
Yeah.
say, okay, you're the highest player on this team, where it could be an 8-year deal with a $7 million average, but the first 2 or 3 years he's making $3 million a year or $4 million a year. I don't know. It could be backloaded. These are all hypotheticals that are out of the realm of my knowledge or forte, I guess I could say. I don't know if that would kind of send a message to either Pellick or Pulak. But at the same time, I think everybody within the organization realizes just how good Noah Dobson could be.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting because, again, like I said, I don't know if he gets a higher dollar amount than Pellick or Pullock just yet. So that's where the bridge deal might come into play. But if Noah Dobson, and it seems like he's a reasonable person and a great locker room guy. If he's sensible enough to say to himself, "I'd love to sign long term here. We're building something special at the dollar amount of maybe an 8x6 deal." Uh, that's a steal for the Islanders right there, and he knows that they're building something special towards the future. And if he shaves off a little off the top, it helps everywhere else for the Islanders and Lamoriello and what he's able to do and acquire um, in the offseason. So um, I I'm with you. I won't rule it out. It does seem a little more likely, though, to me that he'll get a bridge.
Yeah.
However, we have seen Lamoriello step up a year early in Ryan Pullock in extending guys to an 8-year deal. When he extended Ryan Pullock for 8 years, everybody was kind of like, "Whoa, that came out of nowhere." So,
Yeah.
listen, Lou Lamoriello, it's a crapshoot with him. Anything can happen. So
I,
you
I,
you never know.
yeah, I think you run the risk of if a bridge deal does happen and Dobson gets even better and
Yeah,
better, and suddenly he's a 65, 70 point defenseman, and he's averaging 23 to 25 minutes per game.
right.
All of a sudden, then you run the risk of when that bridge deal does end, he's priced himself out of your market,
Right. He's almost there now. I think he's averaging like 21 and a half, maybe
right?
22 minutes a night. And if it wasn't for the whole season, it was like from December on when he really took off that he was playing 22 minutes a night. And then you have Cal Clutterbuck and Scott Mayfield go down. He starts getting penalty kill minutes, and now it's even more. So I'm 100% in agreement with you there. You do run that risk. So locking him up long term would definitely be the move right now. 8 point, sorry, by 6 should sound good to him after making 925 for the last 3 years. So we'll see where that goes. The one thing I wanted to ask you about, Joe, was you did say number one defenseman. You did say possible future Norris candidate. There was a huge I want to say I don't want to say argument, but there was a disagreement. I'll go with that word amongst fans on social media that Noah Dobson can never rise to this echelon of player. Have you seen his defense? He's quote unquote horrific in his own end. At 22 years old, what did you see from him defensively? We know what we saw from him offensively. And are these things that he can continue to develop and grow to improve on?
There were certainly growing pains.
From a 22-year-old? Come on,
It's-
Joe.
right. I think I don't know what I don't spend. I go on Twitter, I tweet what I have to tweet, and I get off.
I'm in and then I'm out.
I don't need that kind of stress in my life, nor do I need the strain of reading some of these comments. Yeah, this Noah Dobson's defense is obviously a little bit behind his offensive game, and that's
Sure.
what I'm not saying. But I don't think you need to make it sound like it can't be corrected, which I think a lot of fans are doing. That his defensive game couldn't be corrected when he's playing under Barry Trotz.
Right.
The team that established defensive hockey really over the last like 3 years.
Right. And when you look at and listen, this is no slight to Zdeno Chara, but for the majority of the season, Dobson kind of pulled him along with him, you know?
Yeah, and I again, this is what Zdeno Chara was able to do in his age 44 season and playing 70 plus games, and being willing to drop the gloves and mentoring young defensemen. It can't be understated how important that is. But at the same time, Noah Dobson was playing with the equivalency of a traffic cone.
Right.
Um, Zdeno Chara was slow, and he was as close to stay at home near the net as you can get. Where how many times a game did we see guys just blowing by him down the right wing?
Yeah.
Um, it was a lot,
Yeah.
and I think Dobson sort of had to at times cover for him in a way. Um, I think when you maybe pair him with a younger defenseman whose skill level might be a little bit more similar to his, you know,
Robin Sala?
a lot of these mistakes might kind of
Happen.
decrease.
Yeah.
But granted, at the same time, I mean, I don't. Do I think that Robin Sala should come in and play with Noah Dobson, two really young guys? That'll never happen.
No.
That will never ever.
Oh,
Happen.
he did one game.
Yes, and half the roster was where
Yeah.
It's, but yeah, that's I think Noah Dobson's game was good. I would give it maybe like a B minus. Maybe even a C plus. That being said, I think his offensive game kind of raised his overall level to a B plus.
Right.
You still have room for improvement where again, you get a full off season where you're working with the Islanders coaching staff and it's all right, we know you have your offensive game. It's still going to be there. We want you to play exactly that way, but maybe in the defensive zone you have to be a little more conservative.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden his value is going to an A.
Yeah, I'm with you. Listen, 22 years old, 51 points in his third season, pretty much his first full NHL season. You really got to see what kind of player and echelon he can bring himself to. And listen, when you have guys like Kevin Weeks saying that he's got a little bit of Kel McCarr in him, you can't sit here and tell me, fan on Twitter that there's absolutely no way he can raise his game when a guy like Kevin Weeks, who's been in the game and is now an analyst of the game, says he's got a little bit of Cale Makar in him, who, oh, by the way, scored the most goals as a defenseman this season. So great news on Dobson. Yes, he's got some room to grow, but he's just 22 years old. If the Islanders lock him up long term right now, that's an absolute win. We'll see what happens there. Hockey fans, the pursuit for the Stanley Cup is on, and DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, has an unbelievable offer for the most exciting playoffs in sports. New customers can bet $5 on any team to win and get $100 in free bets, no matter what, win or lose. Looking to turn a small bet into a big payday during the playoffs? With DraftKings same-day game parlays, you can do just that. Create your own parlay by combining multiple bets, like which team will win, how many goals will be scored, and more. It's your shot at even bigger payouts. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. Best of all, you can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now, use promo code THPN, bet $5 on any NHL team to win, and get $100 in free bets, no matter what. That's code THPN at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. Want to move to goaltending. And there were some great comments by Sorokin on Varlamov, and then there were some great comments by Varlamov on Sorokin. Let's hear from them both and what they had to say about each other.
We're good friends. We have a really good relationship, yeah. And I'm really happy that I have this guy in our team because he helped too much. Any questions that I have, he answer and help me.
I think he had a great year, and then stats shows. If you check his stats, his save percentage, goals against, and then I think he's a top 5, top 10 goalies in the league, and then he played very well from the beginning of the season, and he finished season very strong too. so that's positive for him. I'm very happy for him. He definitely improving his game each year he's playing in this league. You know, it's not easy league to play, and that was the second year for him. You know, we know like sometimes the guys they don't play well like second season NHL, but he play outstanding, so that's good for him.
I mean, we've heard all season that these two have a great friendship, and maybe they don't quite flaunt that friendship like Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark on the Bruins after every game with that display of a hug after each win, which is great, by the way. I love seeing that kind of stuff, but they're a little more reserved about their friendship. But every time they're asked about each other, they're always saying that they have a great friendship. Sorokin talks about how much of a value Varlamov is in his development and learning English, and how he's come a long way because of him. And then Varlamov kind of takes that father role where he's kind of happy to see where he is. Talks about how much he's developed already in his second season with the Islanders, and he's a top 10 goalie now. And he's happy for him to take that step forward. Um, Varlamov later in that exit interview did say that he was relieved at the trade deadline that he was not moved. He had a little bit of say in that, but um, ultimately he was happy to stay, and further said that he wants to remain and see it through with his contract. I don't know. If you ask me, I can't see the Islanders running these two back. I can't. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase. I can't not see the Islanders running these two back in net because this is a two goaltender league. You need two viable goaltenders. And when Sorokin was unavailable, Varlamov took over. When Varlamov was unavailable, Sorokin took over. And each and every night, one of those two guys gave the Islanders a chance to win. If the Islanders are expecting to be contenders next season, they need both of these guys. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. Um, I think it's pretty clear that this season saw the passing of the torch. Ilya Sorokin is the Islanders' number one goalie, and Semyon Varlamov is one of the best backup goalies in the league now. He's also one of the most expensive backup goalies in the league.
Yeah.
But that is what it is. Really, I think just to ensure that, I mean, Sorokin already does have his footing in North America. He's fine. He's adjusted to the game really well. That being said, I think one more season with Varlamov won't hurt. It's a great partnership. They support each other fantastically. And then I think it's more of a decision of what's going to happen in 2023-24. I think that's the bigger question. I'm with you. I would be absolutely shocked if Semyon Varlamov was not a member of the Islanders come opening night next year.
Yeah, I almost wonder after. I'm going to chalk it up to he'll be back next season. I don't think that they're going to, despite having $5 million on the cap, I don't think they're going to move him because again, this is a two goaltender league. I wonder about his next contract. If is he going to stay? I could see him staying and kind of taking a Clutterbuck deal, right? Remain for another year or two, take half of what you made, and that's plenty good for me in a backup goaltender situation. What do you think there?
I think it comes down to the mindset of if he thinks he's still a starting caliber goalie in the NHL.
Right.
I think he has, he's had plenty of chances, obviously this season, last year, he had, he played starting time. I think if we see a sizable decrease in his playing time next year, that conversation might change, especially if he plays well. If he comes through with a 9.2 save percentage and a 2.6 goals against average, and he hits free agency, there's going to be a ton of interest in him.
Yeah.
And sure, the thought of staying where you want to stay is all fine and dandy, but if a team comes in and they're offering double what the Islanders are offering and the opportunity to start, that's probably going to be difficult for him to turn down, even if he's going to be 35 next offseason. So it's tough.
Yeah, I think a little bit of the state of the team has to come into play there as well, depending on how they have and see success for the 22-23 season. If they do return to the playoffs, if they do make that deep playoff run, if they get just close enough again and maybe don't snag it, he might want to see it through. But agree with you. It is a situational situation. However, he will most likely, in our opinion, be back on the Islanders next season, probably not moved. Again, you'd be crazy not to run this tandem back. You saw what happened in Vegas, right? Robin Leonard went down multiple times. Listen, Logan Thompson, all the credit to him in the world. He gave it his very best, but it's not a Varlamov Sorokin tandem over there. It's Leonard and backup goaltender. And you saw the demise of the Vegas Golden Knights, and they had a plethora of injuries. But I bet if Robin Leonard was in net for the majority of those games that Logan Thompson was playing, they probably would have had a little bit of a better chance of getting into the playoffs this year.
I do think that a part that is going to play in the future of Semyon Varlamov with the Islanders is going to be Linus Soderstrom. Um, you know,
Jakub Skarek.
mm, there is Skarek,
I
but
don't even think Soderstrom's part of the organization anymore. No,
is he really not?
I think he's gone.
I was going to say, I think he was pretty highly touted, but if it's Skarek or Soderstrom, I don't know. There are young goalies brewing in the system, and you might have to do some research for me, or we have to call up Michelle Anderson over there, who's our
Yeah.
prospect expert. But that being said, I think that the organization is at some point going to want to give a fair shake to their younger goalies.
Yeah, that's fair.
Where I think a cheaper backup option would be available compared to Varlamov, but I'm gonna have to do my research now and see where Linus Soderstrom is, because I thought he was pretty highly touted.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, he was returned to Sweden. I think they terminated his contract.
Wow.
I think it might have been 2 summers ago.
I learned something new today. I thought he was in camp.
No, but the other kid, Jacob Skarek, he has actually seen some pretty good progress. So what you might have seen in terms of prospect progress in goaltenders, you might have seen it in Skarek and just maybe confuse the S names, because I think that he might be a little bit better than what the Islanders initially thought. So that's good news in the goaltender pipeline.
Yeah, sure.
Want to talk about Oliver Wahlstrom. He says that he needed the tough love this season, and it was good and helpful for his development. Um, he talks a lot about improving this offseason. There's a lot of little things he can get better at in his game. He was asked about the amount of practice time he had, which was a fair question, in my opinion, because there wasn't a whole lot of time to practice and hone his skills in season, given the schedule. Kevin Kurz wrote yesterday with The Athletic that there's a possibility he can be involved in a quote-unquote hockey trade. Do you see that, or do you see him in the lineup next season, and where do you see him in the lineup next season?
Is this a scenario where trading him really opens up doors and gives the team a plethora of cap space? I mean, he might be used to sweeten the pot per se. I think that that tough love that came from the organization and the coaching staff. I mean, obviously it's trying to better him, but the short leash certainly indicates that there wasn't a lot of trust
Right.
in his game. I mean, granted, they kept giving him opportunities because they really had no better options within the system. But if you could, I'm not ready to close the door on Wallstrom. Again, I think if you put him in a different system, I think he's a completely different hockey player. Again, you're talking about a guy who's a sniper who's trying to learn on the fly to play two-way hockey at the NHL level. That's not easy.
I'm with you.
And you saw, like I talked about with Noah Dobson, you saw the growing pains in Oliver Wahlstrom's game this year. So I think it would really need to take a big fish for the Islanders to think about parting ways with Wahlstrom.
Yeah.
A package deal which brings back a superstar.
Perennial goal scorer.
Yeah, you're giving up, first round draft picks, a Beauvillier, a Wahlstrom, and a prospect or something like that, where it's going to have to be something franchise altering, earth shattering, NHL blockbuster making. But for now, I don't see the issue with giving Wallstrom another chance if that opportunity doesn't arise to make that big splash where he needs to be included to make it. Um, he has the shot. He has the shot. He has the skill set.
Yeah.
He just needs some fine tuning. And he's young. I think he'll get there.
You know what I like about him? He's got a little bit of nastiness in his game. And you need that, right? Look at and I'm not saying that they're comparable players, but maybe there's a little bit of similarity there. I look at the Kachuk brothers and I see how they get under people's skin, and Wallstrom's not afraid to do that. Maybe he doesn't do it as often, maybe he doesn't do it as well. But he's going to score 30 goals eventually in this league. And you need a guy like that who's a bit of an agitator, but can do but can also put the puck in the back of the net. So I'm not saying that Wallstrom can be like a Kachuk or as good as a Kachuk, but he has that similar style to his game. Maybe a little bit more of a sniper. The Kachuks, score dirtier goals, but he has that edginess that I really like to see. Not afraid to stand up for his teammates, and especially at such a young age. And again, he's just 21 going on 22. I feel he's essentially just one season behind Noah Dobson in terms of his development, right? Dobson had a little bit more time at the NHL level. And I think that there's reason to believe that next year, maybe even the year after, he can really start to take off. So I'm with you. I wouldn't give up on Oliver Wahlstrom yet, unless, like you said, he's involved in one of those hockey trades that brings you back a perennial scorer, goal scorer, an all-star, if you will. So we'll see what happens with Oliver Wahlstrom. But yeah, the tough love, like you said, that was purposeful. That was in terms of developing him as a player because they see him as part of the solution moving forward. So. And I don't know if the Islanders are at the or have the luxury of trading away their young guys.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think they are either. And I don't think they'd be willing to.
Yeah,
But again, it's you have to pay to get.
right,
Um, and you know it, they're still in a tight spot. Are they going to have enough money to get a big name free agent when you were also talking about potentially giving Barzal a long term extension, giving Dobson
right.
a long term extension? Um, or do you have to give up some young pieces to get? Do you have to give up a Bodie Wild? Do you have to give up an Oliver Wallstrom? Do you have to give up Jacob Scarrick? Do you have
Right.
to, you have to give up Kiefer Bellows? There's, I think there's levels to it of which ones you'd obviously be more willing to part with. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think there's really one or two prospects that might be untouchable within the organization. I think one is Atu Ratu, given the hype that's all around him. So I don't know. It's a tricky offseason to navigate. It's not as difficult as it
Sure.
was last season, when I think Lamoriello did a pretty good job trying to clear up some cap space.
Yeah.
But I think this might even sound tired. I think they laid down the foundation. They have these parts here where we know Zach Parise can be a contributor.
Right.
We know that the fourth line is still going to be intact next year. We have the Islanders have their top two defensemen locked down. So now it's just, can they finally bring in that extra little bit of flair, that extra puzzle piece or two that's going to actually make them, not just a team that nobody wants to see in the playoffs, but a team that's okay. These guys are actually legit.
Yeah.
They're going to be in the conversation to win a division. They're going to be a top 2 or 3 seed in the Eastern Conference, and they're going to be a perennial second or third round playoff team, if not more.
Yeah, and you heard that from opposing teams and their coaches throughout the season. Even though they weren't in the playoff picture, the Islanders were not a team that coaches enjoyed playing against, and they knew it was going to be a tough matchup every night, regardless of playoff position. So I think that's going to remain moving forward. And I'm with you. I think that next season they're going to be one of those teams in the regular season and in the playoffs that nobody's going to want to run into. Two players that you mentioned, real quick, yes or no. We'll elaborate on another episode in the future, but only yes or no answers right now. Anthony Beauvillier, will he be a New York Islander in 22-23?
No.
Josh Bailey, will he be a New York Islander in 22-23?
No.
Wow. Scott Mayfield, will he be an Islander in 22-23?
Yeah.
And Semyon Varlamov, I think we know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was Bailey's tough.
I know that is a tough
tough.
one.
And
I saw a good article by our friend Mitch Anderson, who you mentioned earlier, where he actually he got ahead of the game on the off season and started contemplating some good landing destinations. And there was a lot of talk amongst the Ottawa Senators saying that they're ready to take the next step forward. They want to win, but they need some veterans. That might be a good landing spot for Josh Bailey because they have the cap space in Ottawa, and maybe there's something that the Islanders could use from the Senators. So. Pure speculation. I thought it was a good read. If you want to check it out, by Mitch Anderson, Eyes on Isles. But we mentioned Scott Mayfield. His exit interview was an encouraging one. Says he's 100% healthy headed into the offseason. You said that he won't be moving from the Islanders. What is his role going to be in 22-23? Where do you see him fitting?
I think optimally he would be a third pairing defenseman.
Yeah, I'm with you.
A darn good third pairing defenseman at that. I think
Yeah.
the organization trusts him. Again, he's got the experience. He knows the system, and he could certainly hold that final pairing down.
Yeah.
It's finding his partner and maybe a second pairing defenseman that's going to be
Yeah.
the question this offseason. But I think Mayfield is. I know for a fact that he gets a certain amount of hate on social media.
No, come
but
on.
I think I think he's too invaluable to let go.
Yeah.
I can say it with some confidence, at least. He should be getting trade calls throughout the off season. I think that there are going to be some teams that are needy on the blue line that are shot in the dark. They know the Islanders have a need. They're going to have a need, and if there was a defenseman that could be traded that would bring something back for the Islanders that they'd be willing to part with, it would be Scott Mayfield.
Yeah, I'm with you. However, I do also believe that he will be back next season. I think I'm okay with if Rob and Salo can prove it. If it's him and Salo on that third pairing, I know Samuel Bolduc will be trying to make the team next season as well. They say that Bolduc is like a Pellic light, so that's pretty encouraging to hear. So we'll see what that third pairing looks like, but I definitely agree that he's the optimal third pairing guy, especially for his cap hit and what he brings on the ice. So Scott Mayfield, 100% healthy, headed into the offseason and should be back as an Islander next season. Speaking of the defense, what do they look like in 22-23? Charo was spoken about, Green was spoken about. They're both unsure of what their future is going to look like. Do either of those guys come back, and in what capacity? And what do the Islanders really need to do? What kind of defenseman do they need to acquire? And if you have a name, drop one.
I don't have a name. That's for sure.
That's fair.
That being said, I think Andy Green could return or should return as a coach.
I like that a lot.
And I think Zdeno Chara should ride off into the sunset. He has nothing to prove. Zdeno Chara has absolutely nothing else to prove. I know he might want to, go for another ring, but I don't think there's any contending team out there that would take a 45-year-old defenseman who, again, incredible shape. He defies father time.
Yeah.
But
I think I'm okay with him coming back as a coach if he wants to, much like Andy Green.
Sure. No, have him work within the organization, find a spot for him, 100%.
Yeah.
That's the only way that I think. Well, that's the only way I think they should return. The organization. I think a lot of people out there would actually agree with me there. But in terms of replacements, I think, there are going to be some young guys that get pretty good looks. I don't necessarily know what's out there on the market right now of defensemen that they can go for. I don't think it's all that enticing if I'm not really sure who's out there. Um, and then it comes down to the question of, well, where do they want to spend their money? Where do they want to make the big move? Do they want to get that big time goal scorer, or are they going to use what money they have to go get a defenseman? Um,
Right.
so it might be, one side of the puck, you might see them try to make trades, and the other side of the puck, you might try to see them use their money. So I don't know.
I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit again regarding the forward group. We know what the free agency pool is going to look like. And really, if the Islanders are looking to improve their first line, there's only one of three players they could sign in free agency. It's going to be Johnny Gaudreau, it's going to be Philip Forsberg, or possibly Claude Giroux. I'm on the fence with Claude Giroux just because the Islanders need a goal scorer. And yes, he is a former 30 goal scorer, but he's a little later in his career, and you don't really know if he can bring that caliber of scoring back. Granted, he's doing pretty well with the Florida Panthers, but the Panthers score about 15 goals a game. So that's not fair to sit here and assess. However, Johnny Gaudreau is having a career year. He's up for possible Hart candidacy. And Philip Forsberg, I think, had his career best year in the goal scoring department. Who's the main priority for the Islanders heading into free agency? Do you think it's Johnny Gaudreau? Do you think it's Philip Forsberg? Could it be Claude Giroux?
I think Giroux is a little too old to bring in.
I'm going to agree with you there.
This is one of the oldest teams. It's not the oldest team in the league. The last thing they need to do is bring on Claude Giroux. I would be shocked if Philip Forsberg left Nashville. I think Calgary will do everything they can in their power to keep Johnny Gaudreau.
Yeah, I'm curious. They have a little bit of a cap situation themselves going on over there, and Matthew Tkachuk's qualifying offer is going to be $9 million. So it's going to be hard to keep them both. But if they can't, you'd have to think that Johnny Gaudreau is the guy that the Islanders need to go after their very hardest. Could you imagine a Barzal Johnny Gaudreau tandem?
That would be something. That would be pretty interesting.
And listen, talent-wise, no slight to Elias Lindholm, but he's never played with a better center than Mathew Barzal. So that would be a gift for Islander fans.
I think Gaudreau and Barzal's games are sort of comparable, where Gaudreau is sort of a pass-first kind of guy. Well, not a pass-first guy, but he's an assist guy. Would Islanders fans love him? 100%. Is he that sniper? I don't know. I will say the name again, and it will get people kind of mixed up or whatever. I think they should monitor the situation of Patrick Laine, restricted free agent. I don't know if Columbus is going to do everything they can to keep him.
Right.
The Metropolitan Division is tough. They are one of the bottom teams, and they need a lot to be a contender.
Yeah.
I don't know if they can do that while keeping Patrick Laine on the books, giving him a big contract. That remains to be seen. But if he is available, there is your just pure goal scorer that the Islanders have been coveting for ages now, where all of a sudden your first line is then Barzal and Patrick Laine.
Yeah, I mean, you could see Barzal being that 60, 70 assist guy, and you could see 90% of those assists go to Patrick Laine. So, yeah, I definitely agree with you there. That would be definitely something to monitor. I was going to ask you who your dark horse was, via trade, but you just gave it to me. I think Patrick Laine is your dark horse, and
there it is.
There will be some disagreements about whether they should or should not acquire a guy like Patrick Laine. Oh, he doesn't play defense and he's lazy, yada yada. But the Islanders have not had a goal scorer of the echelon of Patrick Laine since Mike Bossy. So it's not something that you don't try and do. It's something that the Islanders should look into. Depending on how Columbus handles their offseason, we'll see what happens. But I do like the pick. Patrick Laine is a good one to hear. I think that wraps it up for us here, Joe.
Sounds
It
good.
was it was great to have you back. I appreciate you coming on. And John was absent this week. He's visiting Long Island, and he's getting back to his roots and recharging and relaxing. So thanks for filling in. Thanks for coming back. We missed you, and we look forward to having you on again.
I appreciate it. I missed you guys too. I'm gonna go study Islanders goaltending prospects.
Real quick, we want to say thank you to DraftKings. Use that THPN promo code. Thank you to the Hockey Podcast Network. Thank you to IslesFix, and of course, all of you, our listeners. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Nassman Hockey. You can find my work at The Fourth Period. You can find Joe's work at Tailgate Sports and AM New York. And until next time, everybody, let's go out.